what is estimated. There's different reports. I don't know which one's like accurate. You know how net worth things are, right? Like
Yeah,
it's not
yeah, yeah.
100%. It's all estimation, right? So we don't know the actual numbers, but every report that I've seen, every like article I've seen, is estimated he's lost over $1 billion in his net worth, right?
Oh
So
my God, bro.
I know,
Bro,
I know, right?
bro. The thing is, I get hurt when I lose $20. I can't imagine just $1 billion. I just out of your net worth overnight, bro.
All right, today we are talking about the Kanye West saga. If you missed it, it's been in the news. We are not going to cover this. So if you clicked on this video expecting us to explain what happened with Kanye West, we are not going to do that. What we are going to do is dive into the lessons and the branding principles we can derive from this whole saga, what it means for Adidas, what it means for Kanye West, and then what we can, as entrepreneurs, brand builders, small businesses, what we can learn and apply to our own businesses from this entire saga so it doesn't happen to us. So first off, I do think a little bit of context here, a couple of points that I'm going to mention that we'll get into, and Momo would love to hear your thoughts as well. Just feel free to chime in whenever you got a point, right? So first thing is, after this whole saga happened, right, there's reports that Adidas lost an estimated $250 million worth of profit for this next year. That's $250 million of
Crazy.
profit.
That's
You
a
know what I
quarter
mean?
billion. Quarter
That's
billion.
not that's not revenue. Yeah.
Oh,
That's $250 million of profit that they lost by cutting ties with Kanye West. Now, the other thing is Kanye West took a giant hit as well, right? And
oh my
so
God.
when we talk about Kanye West, what is estimated, there's different reports. I don't know which one's like accurate. You know how net worth things are, right? Like
Yeah,
it's not
yeah, yeah.
100%. It's all estimation, right? So we don't know the actual numbers, but every report that I've seen, every like article I've seen, is estimated he's lost over $1 billion in his net worth, right?
Oh
So
my God, bro.
I know,
Bro,
I know, right?
bro. The thing is, I get hurt when I lose $20. I can't imagine just $1 billion. I just out of your net worth overnight, bro.
and,
Like,
and you got to think about it. It's not just like $1 billion, but it's like his baby that he built,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
it's just been like taken away from him. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not deserved and it shouldn't happen. I'm saying that's what happened. I'm just giving you the
yeah.
facts here. I'm not taking a stance on it. All right, I want to be very clear on that, right?
Hey, Cheema's taking these lessons very seriously.
Yeah. And so what happens is, so like I think Forbes, if we look at that, like he was on the Forbes billionaire list, and
Mm,
after this happened, he's no longer considered a billionaire, right?
mm.
I think some of the numbers that I saw was that he was worth about 2 billion, and now he's worth like 400 million, something like that, 400, 500
That's
million. So
wild.
it's a giant chunk of his net worth that he just lost there. And so
Yeah.
when I look at this, there's a couple things that come to mind, right? And I want to get right into it. I want to start with the first thing. There's a book I read by Fabian Gerhalter. It's called Bigger Than This, right? And
Mm,
what this book does is he highlights a few different examples of different brands where they take a commodity product, right? A product that everyone already has. Everyone already has like a decent amount of them, right? So like one example of a product that they had is like office supplies, right? Another example of a product they had is shoes. Actually, he mentions a brand that is in the shoe game, and so they take a commodity product and they turn it into a brand that's admired, right, and respected, and they're able to charge a premium, right? How do they do that? And so he mentions like 6 or 7, I think maybe 8 different principles to actually follow, like frameworks that you can use to actually turn your own brand into one of these admired brands. One of those things he mentions is beliefs or values, whatever you want to call it, right?
mm.
Just the concept of the brand itself having certain values and standing for something and having beliefs, and those beliefs resonating with your target audience. So talking about that, what we have to understand is that, number one, Kanye West is a master at attention, right? If we look at the marketing funnel, right, we start at awareness. This guy knows how to get awareness. He's stayed relevant for all these years. And you see throughout his like trajectory, like the way you stay relevant. And if you've seen the social dilemma, you'll know that, like, the way social media works and these algorithms are built is that the more polarizing your take is, and the more, you know, at the end of the spectrum your opinions are, the more that information is going to spread, right? And so he understands this, and that's why he's been able to stay relevant for so long. Like everyone, like Kanye first came out when, like 2000 or something? Do you remember what year? 2005, something
Oh
like that?
man, it was yeah, late 2000s. He really got big at like 2008, 2007. Like that's when
Yeah.
he really started. And then early 2000s, early 2010s, like really good albums he dropped. Late registration, college dropout, all those albums, classics,
Uh-huh.
hits. So yeah, during that time, yeah,
Yeah, and so like how many rappers or like musicians even like they have a brief period of time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years if you're like a goat, right? Like if you're really
yeah,
good at what you do and
yeah,
you kind of stay relevant, right? But like at some point that fades, right? And so like Kanye has been able to, stay in the zeitgeist per se, right? Stay in like trending on Twitter every few months, right? Like he's
yeah,
been able to do
yeah.
this and he understands how this machine works, right? And so that's the first thing. We understand that like this guy knows how to get attention. When we are building a brand, like awareness is just one aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
And if you really know your tribe, you know your people that you're trying to target, like that should give you an
And then
understanding of where the
yeah,
line is, right?
yeah.
And so what
And I think
what he did is like in the pursuit of I'm gonna kind of, I don't know what his intentions were, but like often when you fall into this trap of pursuing what is being trending or being the most viral person on Twitter, in this pursuit of awareness, oftentimes what happens is you're not able to kind of clearly see the line. And so what happened in this case is that some of the things he said alienated a big portion of his target audience, of the people that
yeah,
support him, buy his products, listen to his music, and all that stuff.
it alienated people, that were with him from day one. Loved, all his music, bought the Yeezy, supported him. And I know a lot of hardcore like Kanye fans, and it seems that like whatever he says, they'll find a way to like come up with an excuse to be like, oh, this is what he actually means. He's like
Right,
Adidas,
right,
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, like just
'Cause-
like people are like even with this controversy, they're like, hey man, he's trying to get out of his Adidas deal, so he said all these things, and he lost $1 billion, but he's gonna get more. And I'm like, bro, what are you? But I feel like
yeah, yeah.
like in the pursuit, and I think Kanye in general, he's a contrarian. By nature, he's a contrarian. In the beginning, his music was contrarian to what was popular in the time. His fashion a lot of times was contrarian to what was popular in the time, and I think in the pursuit of his contrarianism, like he just wants to be contrary to what
Mm,
the mainstream,
right.
he went a little too far to contrary,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of pushback. So it's just I think when you lose sight of the audience that follows you, or you lose sight of that line, or you lose sight of that, it can really hurt you, like what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah. So now let's get on into the audience, right? And then also the Adidas side of things. So that's number one. So Kanye, in my estimation, right, like he crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed, and his tribe and a lot of people felt alienated. Right now, let's get over to his audience, right? Let's talk about why Adidas like is willing to put $250 million on the line to say that, hey, we're not crossing this line. Why? Like, what did Adidas understand about this that Kanye didn't? You know what I mean?
yeah,
And here's my take on it, and this is my opinion: is that look, the vast majority of people that are going to be buying your products in the next 10, 15, 20 years, at this point in time they're known as what? Gen Z, right?
yeah.
And so Gen Z people, these are people that grew up with Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Being woke to them is like a big deal, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these guys, I'm a millennial, right? So I'm kind of a little bit older. But for these guys, it's really important that the brand represents its mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they will be so quick to call out when, Adidas, Nike, whatever other brand, doesn't matter, Kanye, when they go against what their mission is or what they said they're going to do, they will call it out. They're big on accountability. They're big on transparency. Why is that? Because they grew up with fake news. You know what I mean? Like everywhere
Mm-hmm.
they see, they don't know what to trust, right? And
Yeah.
so for these people, transparency is huge and the authenticity is huge, right? Being true to who you are, having a mission and voice, and then sticking to it.
Back in the day, like I'm from like I grew up in overseas, and my parents, I immigrated to this country. I mean, honestly, like I really don't care. Like even now, as a consumer myself, I don't care what Tide has to say about the current political climate, or or Don, my dish soap. Like I'm a Tide is a great, like like washing machine brand. I can wash my clothes with it. Don is great. Like I'm not gonna check Twitter. I'm not gonna check their values and be like, hey, what are they standing for? But that's where really the consumer market is moving to. Like if you are problematic, or you're saying things that are against, or you're doing things that are against what your values and missions say, people, you will get boycotted. Do you remember a long time ago the H&M thing where they had the big, like the shirt that said,
No, tell me
it was
about it.
like the kid, it was a black kid. He was wearing, it was like, it's like, I forgot what the shirt said, but it had like something to do with the monkey, and it was like the black kid was
Mm.
wearing it, right? It was like coolest monkey in the jungle or something like that, and they just had the black kid wearing it, right? Something like that, and it was like it was like if they had any other, it was just a bad look, And then when Twitter got a hold of it, people were screenshotting it, sending it. I'm like, dang man, I can't go to H&M now. You feel me? Like it's just a bad look at this current time and moment in time, and people will hold you accountable, like we were saying. And we've seen countless examples of that in recent times,
Mm.
and that's really where the market of consumerism is moving.
100%. Like Momo, like we can get into the examples, right? We got, back in the day we had Michael Jordan, and if anyone's seen The Last Dance, everyone that's seen it, they know the whole saga about Republicans buy sneakers too, right? So
Yeah.
basically, what happened is there was a political campaign that was happening, and they asked Michael Jordan to be like a sponsor and help out, like and lend his voice to the cause, right? And because he was a black athlete, they were like, oh, like of course he would help us out, right? Michael Jordan refused. He wanted to stay apolitical, and his statement, his famous line from that time, is that Republicans buy sneakers too, right? So he didn't want to align himself with the Democratic Party and like put his weight behind it because he didn't want to alienate his Republican fan base, right?
Mm.
At the time, that was the more profitable stance to take, right? But now, like we fast forward, I think you remember when Colin Kaepernick's whole saga happened, right? Where he got dropped from the 49ers, and then
Mm.
Nike releases this killer ad, which is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
incredible marketing and incredible
Black and
branding.
white. The
It's
black and white, right?
yeah. It was just
That was
and
iconic.
like it was so genius, right? And it was
Yeah.
like nowadays what you have to understand is that the people that are the buying your products, they care about this, right? They care about where you stand on certain issues. And so I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I remember like Nike actually, the market cap actually increased after that whole situation happened, and just the
Mm.
awareness that that raised for the company, right? Like again, this is a function of like all these algorithms, all these social media platforms. They are trying to polarize, right? Those are the takes that actually work. And so brands that understand that these polarizing takes sell lean into it, right? For better
Mm.
or worse, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like we're using examples that are on one side of the spectrum, but I'm sure you can find examples and like very loud, vocal tribe members on the other side of the spectrum, too, that are I'm sure there's people out there. I haven't done my research to that level, but I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are like, no, Kanye is right. Kanye, like support Kanye. You know what I mean? Like
There is. If
because
you look at any
yeah,
YouTube comment section, which is where you find both ends of the spectrum in every YouTube comment section, there are people like, "Hey, man, I think Kanye is right." Like if you see like Andrew Schultz video,
mm,
like basically respond, like commenting, and he like basically made fun of Kanye, and Andrew Schultz does that. All the comments were like, hey man, Andrew's bought out. I never saw the day,
oh
Andrew
really?
would get woke. Like there was a lot of people hating on that video because Andrew was like, Andrew Schultz is a comedian. We're getting a little bit off topic here, but Andrew Schultz is a comedian. He was very like middle of the line. He kind of told that line of staying mostly like
Apolitical, yeah,
apolitical, right? So then when this issue happened, this is a clearly very divisive issue, right? So when he leaned really
yeah,
hard into one side, a lot of his fan base was like, "Hey, bro, I thought you were a real guy. You know, I thought whatever. I thought you spoke to my values, and they
Yeah, yeah.
alienated them.
So that's another thing. Like, you know how I knew it was a big deal. Here's how I found out about the whole
Yeah,
Kanye thing. Because I'm not on. I don't have any news platform. I'm not on Twitter. Like, I barely use
guys.
like any
Chima
of.
has a PhD of maturity. Okay, this guy, you know, he's on social media. He is mature. Okay, this guy's
No,
a
no,
real
no.
millennial.
So here's how I found out about it. I'm on YouTube, and Casey Neistat dropped a video
No
on
way,
the
Casey
Kanye
dropped
situation.
that.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And you know, Casey does not get political,
at
except for
all.
like maybe one or two videos in the past he's gotten political that I can
Yeah,
remember, right? And like
yeah.
you got to remember this. This is Casey, where he moved to LA. He stopped posting daily vlogs for like years, and then recently he came back on, and he's not posting daily, but he's posting like semi regularly, right? And then one of
Mm,
his videos is just talking about Kanye, and then his own start because he's Jewish, right? So he talks about his own feelings and his sentiments,
mm,
and I was like, oh man, like this is a big deal if Casey
yeah,
Neistat is talking about it, right? So
yeah.
that's and I think Casey Neistat just represents this whole like this audience that cares about what the products they buy and the brands they represent. You know what I mean? And the
Yeah.
values of the brands they represent. So coming back to the Gen Z piece, right? So talking about Gen Z, the IBM Institute for Business Development, they released this study. And I was going through this. I'm going to summarize it for you. I'm not going to give you all the details, but basically they did a study on Gen Z and they labeled them into three kind of buckets, right? Two of those buckets were brand devotees, so like basically super fans of the brand, right? Like they will go out of their way to promote the brand, right? They
Hmm.
love the brand. And then there's brand connectors, right? People that want to connect with the brand, they want to talk to the brand, they want to have a relationship with the brand, right? They want to
Yeah.
see that the brand reflects their values. So they basically said 28% of Gen Z is brand devotees. Okay, 48% are brand connectors. Now that's 76% of your entire market of Gen Z. If we're combining this, right? 76% of people that care about what the brand has to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas like in the
Yeah.
past, like you said, like it was just like, hey, where can I get the best product? Where can I, like I need my dish soap. Let me get some dish soap. You go to the
Yeah.
store, right? But now Gen Z has grown up with this kind of it's this age of rapid information where like they can literally look up a company, their values, all this stuff on their phone in like 2 seconds. Not only
Yeah.
can they look up everything at the touch of their fingers, but they can
Mm,
also make their statements at the touch of their fingers, right? Like
100%. Yeah.
whereas in the past you'd have to go to the store and then you're limited to the actual selection that the store had. So like, oh, like Tide said something that I don't like, too bad. Like what else am I going to go with? There's like three other
Well,
options here. One's
and then
a generic store brand.
what is
You know
Arm
what I
and
mean?
Hammer? What is Arm and
Yeah.
Hammer? What is Tide? You know, like so, like, and back in the day, you have to think about like in the 1990s, early 2000s. You're not gonna be like, okay, which political party does Tide represent?
Right,
But
right.
you know, you can't look it up. You know,
I
you're
need to
gonna,
wash my soap. I need
yeah,
that.
like
I need soap for my,
I
I
need to
need
wash my
detergent,
dishes.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I need to wash my dishes. Like, there's no way you're gonna
No,
go
no,
out
Tide is
and
for
use up the,
clothes, but
you know what I'm talking about, Dad. You know, like, but like, I'm talking about like, no, you're not gonna go home and download that old internet, and you're
yeah,
gonna look up
yeah,
Tide.
yeah. No, no one's
Like,
going through like the investor relations, seeing like what they have to say, the mission statement, all
yeah,
this stuff.
like nobody's
But,
gonna be like,
but
the Tide walk with Martin Luther King. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, nobody's looking that up. Nobody's looking that up. You know. Like, but now it's like, hey, like, where does Tide stand on this issue? You know, I want to hear what Tide has to say. Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you're right.
and so
Like,
like
go ahead.
nowadays companies have to have like social media accounts where they're speaking out about these kind of things, right? And
Yeah.
so, like for example, another example of this is like back in the day, right?
Before
During
before before we go on a tangent, what was the third bucket in that IBM study?
it's pragmatists, brand pragmatists, and so these are people that are actually looking for the best value,
Okay, so
right? And so that's the smaller
so
chunk of people.
that's genuinely 14% of Gen Z.
Yeah,
It's not about like it's not about value, is what you're saying. For me, like
yeah,
that's how I look at the products, and I think I think you do too. You're looking into what the brand like. Is this the best product that I can get for my bang for my buck?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So I'm no, I'm not like that. No, I
You're
look at
not a
like
bang for the buck.
no, I'm more of like I see an ad on Instagram. This
Yeah,
shirt I'm
you're a
wearing actually got
consumer.
an ad on Instagram.
You're a
Okay,
consumer.
and I was like, hey, like the way they pitch this actually like this makes sense to me. You know what I mean? Like this solves a
Yeah,
problem I have. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So like, um, that's more. I would put myself more as like a brand connector. I'm not. I don't think
yeah.
I'm an advocate. Like I don't go out of my way to like, hey, I love Nike. I love this. No, because I mean, you know, it's at the end of the day we're dealing with
I'm
people.
like that with a few brands, and I think we talked about them on this
Yeah,
podcast before,
Belroy.
like Belroy.
Yeah.
I'm a Honda. I'm a very big recent, and
Mm,
this is only recent years because my car right now is 180,000 miles. Honda
mm,
Accord, 2008, running strong. It's been keeping me going. So I'm a brand devotee in terms of that because they're so reliable. They're good on gas,
mm.
and I'm like, hey, get a Honda. I'll probably be a Honda for lifer. But in terms of other products, like I'm looking shoes. I'm looking best shoes for standing all day, and I'm looking
Yeah.
at the best shoes in the top of the name of the game. And I think like you're right. A lot of times people are moving from that. Like my baby sister, she's a Gen Zer. She's 13 years old. Her friends have Crocs. She got Crocs. Her friends have
Mm.
Air Forces. She got Air Forces. It's what really what the brand stands for. It's not, oh, these are the best, most comfortable shoes.
Right. 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 Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's really more
Hundred
about
percent.
what does this brand represent. Like
Well,
what image is this brand
you
giving?
got to think about it like when
More.
you have so much choice, right? Then everything becomes a commodity, and then what
Yeah.
separates you, right? Especially like when we're talking about shoes, right? Like shoes or like articles of clothing, really like what differentiates you can't actually be your product, right?
Yeah.
Unless you got like just some weird designs, right? Like that's
Yeah.
one way to differentiate. But like really like for the vast majority of people, how you're differentiating is the values you have, right? And so like what Kanye represented before was kind of like this creative, free spirit, like,
Counterculture
just
kind of. Yeah.
counterculture kind
Yeah.
of vibe, right? And so now, we'll see what happens with that. But I want to talk about Adidas again. So my opinion and my take here is that I feel like Adidas understands this concept, right? And that they understand where their audience is. And they
Yeah.
understand that, yes, like in the short term, they're taking a massive hit, right? Like
100%.
$250
Yeah.
million in profit just in 1 year. If we put like a 5x multiple on that, right? This brand is worth like that's $1 billion in profits in 5 years, right? And so
Yeah.
the brand's worth much more than that probably. So regardless, like they took a big hit financially in the short term, but in the long term, I think the market will reward them, right? Like they have
Yeah.
distribution, they have products, they have everything you need to kind of take. All they need is the next influencer to come in and come up with like a new idea, a new design, and then boom, you're on the money, right? It's I make it sound simple. I know it's not that simple. If you're into design of shoes, and I'm sorry for offending you, but my point is, in the long run, I believe that Adidas will be okay, whereas Kanye
One
is in a
hundred
different boat,
percent. Yeah. 100.
right?
Because the thing is, I bet you Adidas saw that hashtag boycott Adidas, and the top heads of the departments were sweating bullets. You know what I'm saying? Like the last thing you want in today's day and age is to be
Is
a
to get
negative
canceled.
hashtag. It's to be a
Yeah.
negative hashtag, like and get canceled. Like it really, like I remember this happened with H&M, and every time I drive by an H&M, I remember that incident, right? Like that, the shirt with the blockaded wearing that. I remember that incident every time I drive by an H&M. I
Yeah.
never really shopped at H&M to begin with, but I remember that because it was so big on Twitter, and I was on Twitter at
Right.
the time. I remember that, and it affects the image of the brand forever because it was such a like oversight on their behalf. They just didn't have somebody in their diversity, equity, and just whatever department look at it before you release it. You know what I'm saying? If you have one person of color, just had to look at that, and it would have got through. Like, hey, maybe we should not put this shirt out, or maybe we should get a different model for this shirt. So it really like it was a big oversight. So and it's very hard for a brand's image in the future for like to recover. But with Adidas, because they put out that statement and they came back quick, and they're like, "Hey, man, we're losing money on this. I just want to let you know we are putting money where our mouth is. We are losing money on this, but we care about the values that we say we care about. So we're putting money where our mouth is, and we're dropping our relationship. So I think like you said, in the long run, for sure, is going to be a dub for Adidas. They're taking a $250 million L this year, for
Yeah.
sure. What? So
No, and the piece here is that when we talk about like any brand is going to go through some level of crisis, right? If you're in
mhm,
business long enough, you're going to go through something, whether it's a
yeah,
lawsuit, whether it's kind of bad press, whatever it is. And so what defines your brand in these moments is how you respond to it. I don't know, some people are saying that they took too long to respond, and that's a discussion for another time. But what I want to just highlight is like, how do you actually respond to these things? Basically, it's really simple, right? Number one, you have to like acknowledge that it's a problem, right? Like we messed
yeah,
up, right? And you have to
mhm,
say, hey, I'm sorry we messed up. Number two is you overcorrect, right? So
yeah.
I don't know, I didn't do the research to see like what the statement was from Adidas officially, but we do know that they corrected the issue and they canceled ties with.
They canceled ties with Kanye. They're not selling his products anymore, and they will not be giving money to his companies and his future companies. Right?
Let's just kind of take a step back, and for the people that are listening, they have small businesses, they're entrepreneurs, they work with people to build brands. Our target audience that we're talking about, they're probably thinking like, why are we talking about Adidas? Why are we talking about Kanye? What does this have to do with me? I'll tell you what it
Mhm,
has to do with you, right? So number one, the first thing we have to understand is that in today's day and age, the vast majority, if you're targeting Gen Z, you have to at least consider this fact that values and how you communicate your company's values mean something. You
yeah.
can legit build an entire, your differentiating factor can be your values. We look at Bombas, right? Like their mission is to help, like they're a sock company, right? But
Mhm,
their mission is to help with homelessness, right? And so
mhm,
for every sock you buy, they also donate a pair of in charity, right? And so
mhm,
their socks are priced higher. They charge a premium for them, but you're basically buying two pairs, one for you and one for someone who's homeless, right? And so
mhm,
that is like a mission, a value that they have, and then because of that, this brand took off. This is one of the most profitable deals in I think Shark Tank history. I think this is
mhm,
Damon John's most profitable deal that he made on Shark Tank, right? And so that's like one example. Uh, Another thing we know about is like recently we've been seeing a lot of this, right? Nike, Colin Kaepernick. We have Aunt Jemima rebranding. There's, Washington Redskins changing their name, right? There's a lot
yeah.
of these examples. We don't have to go into all of these, but like the reason they're happening is because the target audience wants a brand that they can connect with and feel like they
Mhm,
represent their values, right? And
yeah.
so you have to listen to your target audience, your customers, and take their feedback and adapt with the times, right? So that's number one. Number two, when crisis hits, which it inevitably will if you're in business long enough and you're actually disrupting the place you're in, right? When something happens, you have to accept responsibility, own it, and the person at the top needs to own it, right? Like the CEO has to come down. I know there's a couple examples. So in 1982, uh, there was a big thing with Johnson Johnson where Tylenol, there was some Tylenol that was laced with cyanide, and basically 7 people died, right? And so what happens is Johnson and Johnson basically spends $100 million. This is $100 million in 1982, not in 2022,
Oh,
right?
that's big money.
So,
Almost as
uh,
much as Nike lost, or not Nike,
Adidas,
Adidas. Almost
Adidas,
as
yeah.
much as Adidas
So
lost. Yeah.
they spent $100 million. They issue a recall of every single Tylenol bottle on every shelf ever.
Mhm,
They literally
mhm,
recall every single thing, and they do like a complete like rebrand. And the CEO apologizes, like, "Hey, we messed up. We're doing this complete rehaul." Like a lot of people, what they would have when we get into it, like it really becomes like an ego thing, right? Like if you're not willing to accept the responsibility, then people aren't going to respect you as a leader, right? And so if your
yeah.
brand is in a space where like you have a certain mission and the people at the top are not willing to take responsibility for when someone messes up, then you're going to be in trending saying whatever, you're getting canceled at some point. So
Yeah.
the point is they spent $100 million, and what happens is they took a brief hit in their stock price, and then within 2 months they're back at 52-week highs, right?
Mhm,
So like it had a momentary impact, but like it recovered within 2 months to even like higher heights of their stock price. And so the point is like when this kind of stuff happens, this kind of bad press happens, yes, initially you'll have a little bit of a bad spike. I think right now, if we look at macroeconomic trends as well, we may see a longer, downward trend, because just the entire stock market's kind of in a bad spot with the economy in general. So, but eventually it will kind of come back up, right? And this is a
Yeah.
decision that will earn them trust with their target audience even more. So talking about Adidas, right? So that's the second thing, is like, when you have crisis, number one, accept responsibility, own it, and overcorrect, right? So like, what you may have the tendency to do in a situation like this, like if you're in the shoes of Johnson and Johnson, you may just be like, you may release a statement like, oh, we know it happened at this Ohio facility. I don't know where it happened, right? I'm just making
Mm.
up a place, right? So we know what happened at this Ohio facility. We just shut it down. We fired the employee, and now we're back to business, right? It didn't happen anywhere else. Everything that went from the Ohio facility has been recalled. You could do that, right?
Hmm.
But that like still leaves room. Like, people still have that doubt in their mind, like, oh, can I trust Tylenol? You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
what they did is they're like, no, let's get rid of everything. It's similar to what Adidas did. It's like, no, let's shut the whole line down. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's that's one thing, right? Or that's the second thing I should say, right? So overcorrect, right? So acknowledge, overcorrect. So the last point I wanted to make is that, like, when we talk about differentiation in your marketplace, right? Using the beliefs of your competitors can be a very good example of a way to differentiate, right? So I'll give you an
Hmm.
example of Apple here, right? So Google, for example, collects over a ton of data. Facebook collects a ton of data. All these tech companies that make tech products collect a ton of data. And Apple recently came out with this whole advertise. This ad was so brilliant, by the way. The
The
ad
the
where
click the
you have,
click for the privacy.
yeah, so like the click at the end, but like
Yeah.
basically, throughout the day, he's just people start following him, right? Like, so he's just
Yeah.
going throughout his day or whatever. He goes into the taxi, a person comes in with him, right? And then like at the end, like he gets to his apartment, and there's like 300 people in his apartment, right? Just tracking what he's
Yeah.
doing, right?
Yeah.
And so then he just clicks the privacy thing, and boom, they're all gone. It's just
Yeah.
him, right? Anyway, the point is that because Apple knows that the competitors, their main business model, and one of the main ways they make money is through advertising and understanding the data of their users. Apple's core business is different, right? Apple makes money on the hardware, like selling
Yes.
iPhones. Like, they don't make
The
money off selling
ecosystem.
data.
The
So what they can
ecosystem
do,
and getting you into like
yeah,
all their
yeah.
products.
So what, yeah, so what they're able to do is then say, hey, look, at Apple, we care about privacy, right? We care about this. And then they use that as a value and a differentiator against the competition, right? So, and then they put their money where their mouth is too, right? So like that, I think it was pretty groundbreaking when they added the Ask App Not to Track feature, right? So
Yeah.
like literally overnight, destroying Facebook's business model. But um,
Goodness gracious, that hurt Facebook. I know Mark Zuckerberg was hurt when they came
yeah,
out with
why do
the
you think
ask.
he's pouring all this money into Meta, man? He's
I
like,
mean, he
got
has
to
no.
figure something out.
You're gonna have to do something to differentiate because literally Apple took a massive hit out of Facebook's, stock
Right.
stock prices. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the point I want to make, is that, like, look, what, as a small business or brand, like we're talking about people that, like, if you're competing in your local market, right, and you have a social media account, like, you can pick one of these things, find what your competitors, like, one of the things that, one of the beliefs you can have that'll differentiate you from them, and then just use your messaging and your marketing around that. And then you have to walk the
Mm,
walk as well. Of course, you can't just say like, oh, we're into privacy, and then also collect the same amount of data that that Google and Facebook do, right? Apple
yeah.
also collects significantly less data, and there's been a number of stories where, like, governments have asked Apple for like certain data or certain phones, and they're just like, hey, no, sorry, right? And so
Yeah. We don't
um,
give that data. Yeah.
yeah, so they walk the walk too, right? Because again, as we talked about, if you don't walk the walk, then you're just gonna get canceled and you're out of here.
I think the biggest takeaway here is really like to understand from a personal brand the effect that your personal brand has, right? So you see this with a lot of modern, in today's society where the argument of like, okay, well, we're just people, we can say whatever we want. Why does it matter? You can see it with, like, for example, like Kyrie Irving. He has a lot of like hot takes. He always gets in like hot waters, And you see it like in interviews. He's like, why can't I just be like a regular person? Me and you could share whatever on on Instagram stories or tweet whatever. Nobody's really gonna care. You know what I'm saying? Like like unless it's catastrophic, nobody's really gonna care. If we have some mildly hot take, but when your brand is really tied down to your personal brand, you have to be careful. You have to be careful in the things that you say and the things that you do and how you carry yourself. And I think a really good example of that is Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart is, he's a comedian. There's a lot. His personal brand is tied to a lot of different things. He'd be on podcasts, and for example, he's been on past podcasts like, hey, do you want to, smoke weed, or partake in these drugs or any of that? Because my personal brand really is connected to a bunch of other different brands, and this can cost a lot of people jobs. Like Elon Musk, for example, when he went on Joe Rogan, smoked weed, stopped. Everybody at Tesla had to get drug tested. Like his action affected a lot of different things. So we have to think about, like, as a personal brand, when if you're a company and you're the head of a company or you're involved in a company, you have to think that how your actions can affect the brand that you're working with. We are way past the age, like you said, back in the 90s and the 80s and the early 2000s, where you could be like, as a personal, personally, I don't really care, just buy the product. We're really far gone from the era where now you have to be like, your personal brand and what you stand for heavily affects how your product sells.
The reason why the Yeezy brand in the first place was worth like $1 billion is because of that personal brand of Kanye West, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
heavily influenced by that. And so yeah, that's a really good point. Like you got to be careful, and you got to think through all the impacts, because really, like, nowadays information spreads so rapidly, so quickly, and that perception people have in their minds of your brand can change like this, right?
yeah,
Like on a dime. Like it
yeah,
doesn't matter if they've
yeah.
been using your Tide for like years, right? You say one wrong statement, is like, oh no, I'm going to Arm and Hammer now.
Yeah, 100%. No disrespect to Arm& and Hammer. I know I made some jokes. Arm& and Hammer is a great brand. I use Arm& and Hammer personally. Great brand. I just want to make that be clear. This is Muhammad. Thank you guys so much for enjoying this video. If you enjoyed it, please let us know down in the comments. Do you think Kanye West is going to recover from this? Do you think Adidas made the right play? And thank you guys for watching. Have a great rest of your day.